Ask him if Putin has photos of Trump blowing Bubba. This was the content of an email written by Mark Epstein to his brother, Jeffrey Epstein. And when this email leaked, it basically broke the internet in a sense. Okay, that's a very millennial thing to say. I'm sorry about that. But it certainly raised eyebrows. It caused quite a bit of suspicion. Who's Bubba? Why does Putin have photos of this guy, Bubba, having a great time with second now term U.S. President Donald Trump? Is Bubba the reason for all the obfuscation of the Epstein files? The fact that they didn't exist, then the fact that they now do exist, that there's an actual government project name where they spent over $800,000 trying to redact names from the Epstein files. Maybe they're the names of victims. Maybe they're the names of Republicans. Maybe they're the names of very rich Democrats who play ball. I have no idea, but that's the point of this video, is to do as much research as possible and hopefully not get shot 2 times in the back of the head by my own gun. By the way, I love conspiracies as much as the next person. This is a pretty insane rabbit hole that exists on the internet right now that's very popular and part of the zeitgeist, so it's worth talking about, I feel like. But always do your own research and try to find information from sources that are bipartisan and not just from one angle, which is what I'm getting better and better at doing, I would like to imagine, as an adult man. I've never seen as much gaslighting as I have over the last couple months of people, for some reason, being on the side of Jeffrey Epstein. I don't understand that. People who really hated him last year and now they really love, seems like they love Jeffrey Epstein, so I'm not sure. I don't get that much, to be honest, and it's kind of embarrassing, really. We are now living in bad fan fiction, or some kind of AI-generated nonsense slop. But if AI existed when, like, George Orwell was writing. But no! These are real email exchanges between 2 brothers, thinking that these would stay private conversations until the end of time. But alas, they're not. They're out. And this was just a year before Jeffrey Epstein would be arrested and later die magically in prison. And I say magic because that's what glasses are. They're magic. How does the medicine get in the head? That's what I want to know. The leaks keep raising questions for people that are implicated in the leaks that their teams now have to continuously try and squash. There's some very large names in these files, but few people in the files have taken quite as much flack as Donald Trump and former President of the United States, Bill Clinton, who is not a sexual deviant in any way. At least that's what I heard. What do you mean? Who's Monica Lewinsky? What kind of painting was in Jeffrey Epstein's $1 billion apartment in New York City? Who was in it? Strange. Are you sure we're thinking about the same Bill Clinton? Saxophone player? Bill Clinton? Are you sure? Okay. Well, maybe I'm just wrong. Bill Clinton's team has continuously tried to squash the Epstein stuff for the last few weeks, but things keep popping up every single leak like whack-a-mole. And the Clinton connection has become even more pertinent because Bill Clinton's nickname is Bubba, all right? And you can kind of see where everybody's going with this. I'm obviously not the first person to put these 2 things together. In fact, I'm not really one to know what Bill Clinton's nickname is. But Bill Clinton and Jeffrey Epstein, they rubbed shoulders a few times. How much time did they spend together? Because if you listen to the Clinton PR team, none at all. He didn't know who they were or anything, but obviously. That's the Prince Andrew playbook. But were they closer than the Clinton team would lead us to believe in a post-Epstein world? That is, after his death. What kind of dirty laundry is in the closet or skeleton? You know what I'm saying? This video started as a bit of an addendum to the now ongoing Epstein file rollout, and then spiraled into a genuine, unbelievable deep dive and rabbit hole. And I think as an American citizen, it is my First Amendment right to exercise my freedom of speech and look at all publicly available information on the people who have been elected to control our country and then make videos about that if I want to, right? Without speculation, without allegation, but rather I will use federal investigations and the papers from those federal investigations, the information that has resulted from those investigations to make content that I can then show you, the viewer of the Oompaville channel. Maybe we can learn together. It turns out Bill and Hillary Clinton have been subjects of more federal investigations than perhaps any other American political couple. And both, as you probably know, were at the top of their political party at different times. Bill in the 90s and Hillary around 2016 when she lost to Donald Trump. Bill was president and Hillary was nearly president, winning the popular vote, but not the Electoral College. After multiple independent counsels, congressional committees, FBI probes, and over $70 million in investigation costs, the record shows a complex pattern. Convicted associates, findings of rule breaking and carelessness, but no criminal charges have ever been brought against either Clinton personally. So you could say they're living the American dream. The two have faced a lifetime of controversy spanning from the 1978 Arkansas real estate scandals to the 2025 Epstein document releases that we are now living through. Now, a lot of people say if it walks like a duck and it talks like a duck, it's probably a duck. But I don't think this logic apply to career politician accused of misconduct, crime, and scandal relations. It does not apply. Sorry, I'm not able to fully finish the words of my sentences, so I have a defense in court. I'm gonna be stupid. That's like the whole thing. I didn't know. I typed it into AI. I asked Grok. And this is a 100% Grok generated video. So blame Elon. Imagine if this was a Grok video. That would be so funny. Oh my God. Grok, is this true? So how exactly did the Clintons become the Clintons? In order to find this out and paint the full picture, we have to go to the very start of Bill Clinton's political career, in which it seemed he was paving the way for a future of scandal and controversy, all the while with his wife, Sabrina Carpenter. I mean Hillary Clinton, who has been by his side from the very beginning. Bill, whose full name is William Jefferson Clinton, attended Yale Law School from 1970 through 1973, but met his future wife Hillary, another student, in 1971 when he couldn't stop staring at her, which led her to approach him, introduce herself, and the two soon began dating. He couldn't stop staring at her, and that's how they met, guys. A tale as old as time. In 1972, the two became campaigners for George McGovern, a Democratic Party presidential candidate who would go on to lose to Richard Nixon. That's right, Tricky Dick. While McGovern may have lost, the two learned a lot about the political process and made very important connections. Sarah Ehrman was one such connection, a politician who described herself as first a Jew, second a Democrat, and above all, a feminist. Sarah would be a mentor of sorts to Hillary and later an advisor to Bill during the Israeli-Arab conflict under his presidency. The first time either of them would attempt to run for a public office would be Bill's run for the House of Representatives in 1974 at just 28 years old. This is what that motherfucker looked like when he was 28 years old, 1 year younger than me. In this race, he was going up against John Paul Hammerschmidt, a Republican incumbent who held a lot of influence and public favor and had already held the seat for 8 years and would continue to hold it until his retirement in 1993. That old Hammerschmidt knew what the f to do. I mean, terrible name, but, you know, pretty good tenure as a politician. This loss was the first of only 2 political losses Bill Clinton would suffer in his political career. But even then, he still had the support of 48.2% of voters, just barely shy of winning. It's the closest anyone came to beating the Hammerschmidt in his nearly 3 decades in office, and it was from a first-time runner who wasn't even 30 years old yet. Very impressive to start. And when Hillary and Bill were later married in their living room in October of 1975, they were cementing their future as a powerful couple that had the potential to create a political dynasty. And rather than risk his political future before it truly got started by challenging and potentially losing to the Hammerschmidt again, Bill shifted his attention to the Attorney General role for the 1976 election.
I believe I have the qualifications necessary to give you the best in the Attorney General's office.
There were no Republican challengers, and he'd already done so well in his run for the House that this should be a sure victory for him. And lo and behold, it was. Seems like when you run and don't have anyone else to run against, you'll win. He won with 55% of the vote, leaving the remaining 45% split between his other Democratic opponents, Clarence Cash and George Jernigan. And since he won the Democratic primary and there were no Republican challengers, he was headed straight to the seat.
It looks very good in the polls. Again, we're moving up in Arkansas and I think throughout the country.
However, old Bubba was still climbing the political ladder, and in 1978, he ran for and won the governor of Arkansas, becoming the nation's youngest governor in 40 years at just 32 years of age.
We gave our best. God bless you all, and thank you very much.
And that same year, he and Hillary would embark on a cheeky little real estate scheme that would later come back to haunt them. 1978 was a pretty ambitious year for the Clintons. For assuming the role of governor while he was still just the AG of Arkansas, Bill and Hillary Clinton formed the Whitewater Development Corporation with their friends Jim and Susan McDougal. $203,000 was borrowed for the purpose of purchasing 230 acres of mountain land along Arkansas's White River for the development of vacation homes. It was going to be perfect for Bubba and Sabrina. Beautiful vacation properties with mountain views along the White River in proximity to the small Ozark mountain town of Flippin, Arkansas. At least, it would have been perfect until the Fire Nation attacked. You see, the real estate market took a dive and interest rates rose fairly rapidly, and their plans for real estate wealth left them in the proverbial hole. Most of the investment the two couples had made was lost, but it was all okay for them because Bill still had his promising future in government ahead. After all, he was soon to run for and win the governorship of the state of Arkansas. He'd made a play in real estate, it didn't pan out, and it was time to focus entirely on the political endeavors. While Bill was serving as governor, Hillary was advancing her career in law, becoming the first female partner at Rose Law Firm in 1979. They were both on an upward trajectory, and it seemed nothing could slow them down. The real estate flop was just a tiny bump in the road. Just kidding. The climb would flatline in the 1980s during Bill's re-election campaign for governor, in which he lost big time. It was an election campaign that faced fairly complex issues. Clinton had increased fees on automobiles and raised motor fuel taxes, and had his political career hurt further when his friend, President Jimmy Carter, sent 1/5 of the 125,000 Cuban refugees that arrived in America to Fort Chaffee, Arkansas, resulting in rioting that saw 62 people hurt and 4 buildings set ablaze. That is a really wild event, by the way, that probably deserves its own video at some point. It's insane American history. During this time, after the series of events, it made the Arkansas Democrats appear to be completely incompetent idiots, and the Republican candidate for the 1980 governor election, Frank White, would win, beating the shit out of Bubba. Ironically enough, Frank White was a former Democrat who hopped the fence over to the Republican Party before announcing he was running for governor. So it's like I'm not with these guys. I'm over there. I'm Frank White. All right, that was my. I used to be Frank Gray. Now I'm Frank White. All right. The hell you barking at, you dumb bitch? What the fuck? So 2 scandals in a very short period of time. Bill may have been able to survive one of those scandals, but 2 at once was enough to see him ousted as governor of Arkansas, at least for this election cycle. Following Governor White's election victory, his term faced its own controversies. Utility company rate increases left consumers outraged, feeling as though they'd been gouged. Republican Party members felt he hadn't delivered on patronage, job promises, and lawmakers from both parties were disappointed in the lack of leadership qualities they'd expected from Mr. White. Bubba Clinton wanted back in, and on May 23rd, 1982, the Washington Post reported Wunderkind seeks second chance with the quote, "I'm offering my experience as governor and my experience in losing in 1980. Says the one-time Wunderkind of Arkansas politics. I'm asking for a second chance. And when Clinton and White went head-to-head again in the 1982 election, Clinton won the governorship back from White. It's kind of like the plot from the first 2 Rocky movies, but instead of boxing, it's politics. It's Rocky 1 in 1980. Clinton is Rocky and White is Apollo. He loses tragically. And then in the rematch, Rocky 2, Clinton wins against Apollo, aka White. Sorry, that was a terribly stupid waste of time for all of you. After this, there was no stopping Bill. He would win his 4th, 5th, and 6th election, even surviving a scandal in 1984 when his brother Roger Clinton Jr. was facing multiple drug charges revolving around the distribution of cocaine, for which he later served a year in prison from 1985 to 1986. The drug charges from within the Clinton family did nothing, essentially, to harm Bill Clinton's political career, and he won that year's gubernatorial election with 63% of the vote. That is a lot. And how about the word gubernatorial? Pretty fun to say. Drink some water with me. Pause the video, press the like button, pause the video, get you some water, and drink it. The rabbit hole goes deep. The rabbit hole has yet to begin, really. It was when Clinton began to eye the presidency that ripples from years before would start to rock his hairy boat. On October 3rd, 1991, Bill Clinton announced his candidacy for President of the United States of America from the steps of the Old State House in Little Rock, Arkansas. And as we have learned, anytime that anyone would announce an intent to run for public office, especially the highest office in the land, they then subject themselves to unprecedented levels of scrutiny as people start to dig through their entire past. And on March 8th, 1992, the New York Times would publish a story titled, "Clintons Join S&L Operator in Ozark Real Estate Venture." And this story goes back to the Whitewater Development Corporation that Bill and Hillary had formed with the McDougalls in 1978. The details of the story thrust the national spotlight not onto the failed business in the presidential candidate's past, but rather onto what appeared to be a financial scheme and a subsequent attempt to cover it up. The New York Times article detailed how the real estate venture had mostly left the McDougalls vulnerable. A quote from the article says, "The Clintons appear to have invested little money, so stood to lose little if the venture failed, but might have cashed in on their 50% interest if it had done well." And as we know, it did fail, and Jim McDougal went in a different direction to try and stem the financial bleeding. In 1980, he acquired a bank, then 2 years later acquired a savings and loan company. He renamed this to Madison Guaranty Savings and Loan Corporation and used it to subsidize the loans. Madison Guaranty was then found to be insolvent, which means they could not pay their debts. This institution collapsed and it cost taxpayers $73 million. So while the Savings and Loan Corporation faced possible closure by the state, Governor Clinton conveniently appointed a new state securities commissioner, Beverly Bassett Schaefer, who had previously been a lawyer at the firm that represented the Savings and Loan Corporation. Not only that, but when the Rose Law Firm, which is the firm at which Hillary Clinton was a partner, applied to the Securities Commission on behalf of Madison Guaranty for allowances to test new fundraising plans, they were approved on 2 separate occasions. So that is like very awesome government corruption. But don't worry, Schaefer pinky promised that there was no special treatment, of course. Pinky promises hold up in court. So questions were raised. Obviously, was there a conflict of interest within the department that would be investigating Madison? Was Bill Clinton extending favors to the Savings and Loan Company in exchange for campaign funds? Was McDougal illegally channeling money from the Savings and Loan Corporation into the Whitewater Project? Surely documentation would clear up any confusion, guys. The Whitewater records were themselves a matter of confusion. It seemed as though they'd vanished conveniently. Jim McDougal said that they were delivered to the governor's mansion at Bill Clinton's request, but then the Clintons said that many of them had magically disappeared. They didn't say magic, but they did disappear. By the way, I'm trying to not get too conspiratorial and drinking of children's blood and stuff like that. These are legitimate, real things that we're talking about here that should objectively be talked about more and more and more, I feel, because these are the people who have been shaping and running our country, and this is how politics work in the United States of America. The Whitewater flop was now the Whitewater scandal, and it was just a small bump in the road, not an entire derailment. On July 16th, 1992, Bill Clinton accepted the Democratic nomination for president at the Democratic National Convention with Al Gore as his running mate. He went on to win the election, toppling the Republican incumbent George H.W. Bush in a landslide victory. And we all know about George H.W. Bush. I mean, come on, with what happened in the Gulf War and the Saudis' mission and all this stuff and that blah, 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 and then the 9/11 and all that. Oh, God, it's just a big, long, deep. Those are less official conspiracies, to be honest, but it's like I'm wearing a wig. So that's it for the Whitewater controversy. Basically, pretty much, just kidding, it wasn't over. As only 6 months into Clinton's presidency, Vincent W. Foster Jr., a close friend of the Clintons who had been a deputy White House counsel, was found dead in Fort Marcy Park just outside of Washington, D.C. The cause of death was a gunshot wound to the head with the gun being inserted into the mouth, which was later concluded to be a suicide. However, many speculated that he'd been murdered in a plot orchestrated by the Clintons because of what he might expose regarding the Whitewater case. Several details of his death are pointed to as evidence for these claims. There was little blood on and around his body, for example, which some suggest indicated his body had been moved, but the official explanation is that he was found on a slope, and reportedly this resulted in blood pooling in his lower extremities rather than out of the head wound. His hands were also lying neatly at his side rather than the unpredictable result of a supposed suicide, and this is officially explained by the body position when he would have pulled the trigger if he was was standing, his body wouldn't have fallen neatly, and if he was lying down when he pulled the trigger, the bullet would have likely been recovered in the soil beneath his head, so likely he was sitting, and there was a higher chance that he would fall more neatly, according to these pages in these documents. No bullet was ever recovered as well, and this is explained away that there would have been no way of predicting where the bullet could have gone. Because of the limited information of the, self-inflicted gunshot wound. Two arguments are more significant than the rest, at least I would say. No gunpowder was identified on Foster's face, and no powder burns were inside of his mouth. The FBI report states that a stippled material was scattered on Foster's face, but it wasn't examined during the autopsy, which to me that seems sort of important. To a lot of people, obviously, that seems kind of important. Also, there was reportedly no blood on the gun, and apparently the FBI lab couldn't definitively determine if there was blood on the gun. Some DNA material was present, but it wasn't confirmed or denied to be blood. And they continue with identification of blood on the weapon in gunshot wound suicides is a common, but by no means a universal finding. A note was also left behind by Foster in which he criticizes Washington, D.C. culture where ruining people is considered sport. Vince was the deputy White House counsel handling the Clintons' legal affairs during the time when the Whitewater stuff came back up in Bill's first presidency. So he was very closely connected to this entire situation. Strangely, the same day that Foster died, David Hale, a municipal judge that Bill Clinton had also appointed who ran Capital Management Services, which is a federally backed small business lending company, had his offices searched under the order of Paula Casey, a U.S. attorney appointed by Bill Clinton. The search warrant on Hale's offices had been planned before Foster's death, but the fact that both events happened on the same day fueled a lot of conspiracy and speculation. So, was someone trying to tie up loose ends? Was Hale about to flip? Was Foster involved in damage control? Who knows? David Hale, though, was being investigated for granting bad loans. One such loan was a $300,000 loan to Susan McDougal, the wife of Jim and a partner of the Clintons in the Whitewater real estate scandal. And Hale claimed that while governor, Bill Clinton had pressured him into granting the loan. Now, I am not a member of law enforcement or a criminal investigator, but I think it's normal to use the little fish to flip on the big fish. And who is a bigger fish than the sitting US president? I don't know. I do know that 15 people would be convicted of more than 40 crimes, including Jim McDougal, who was convicted on 18 counts, including fraud, false statements, conspiracy, and other infractions, and he died in prison in 1998. Susan McDougal was convicted of 4 felonies, including mail fraud and wire fraud, but was later pardoned by Bill Clinton in 2001. Arkansas Governor Jim Guy Tucker was facing 10 years in prison, but due to failing health, he was only given 18 months of home detention, followed by 4 years of probation for fraud and conspiracy. And David Hale was sentenced to 28 months in jail, followed by 3 years of supervised release for defrauding the Small Business Association. Now, who was not convicted was either Bill or Hillary Clinton. And it's interesting because reportedly allegations made by Hale helped persuade a grand jury to indict the McDougals and Jim Guy Tucker, an Arkansas governor, but still Hale had levied allegations against Bill Clinton and nothing happened. Maybe the allegation lost credibility after Hale was convicted of multiple felonies, or maybe it's because there were no records showing any transactions between Clinton and Hale. Oh, you mean potential records that McDougal may have sent to the Clintons at the governor's mansion that then mysteriously vanished? Oh, you mean the records that conveniently were later discovered in 1996 on a table in the White House living quarters over 1,000 miles from where they'd been delivered, and 2 years after they'd first been subpoenaed, that then conveniently cleared the Clintons of any wrongdoing? That's very interesting to me. I've got to say that's an interesting plot twist. Once again, I'm not a criminal investigator, not in law enforcement, but I like interesting shit. Another interesting thing is this clip of Norm Macdonald saying the Clintons killed a guy, and he's talking about Vince Foster and this whole shebang that happened in the 90s.
See, I think we should get the homicide out of the White House and get like a fresh start, because we don't want any more murderers.
I think we should just go on to the next question.
Oh.
Who are the murderers? Yeah.
Oh, Clinton, he murdered a guy.
That clip lives in my mind. That was like the first conspiracy that I got into. I remember looking up Norm Macdonald clips and seeing them as like a little tiny boy and just realizing, oh, wait a second. Government's evil and they're all bad. Allegedly. Alongside the Whitewater scandal, another controversy was brewing simultaneously. In May 1993, 7 White House travel office employees were fired seemingly out of nowhere. The White House travel office is responsible for booking travel and accommodations for the White House press corps who accompany the president on trips and later reimburse the news organizations that participate in these trips. They give them their money back because they're following around, making the president look good and stuff. This was very soon after the Clintons entered the White House, by the way, just a few months. And the roles for this office were then filled with supporters and relatives of the Clinton family from Arkansas. A little bit suspicious, These were career staff, not political workers who had handled travel logistics for presidents since the 1960s. It doesn't make sense to just fire everybody and fill it up with your friends. That's some dumb shit that I would do. You know what would make this job better? If I had my friends around me. It gets way worse, by the way. One of these employees that was fired was Billy Dale, who had served the White House for over 30 years and through 8 presidents, but his service would end before Clinton's presidency had even really begun. To the public, it appeared the Clintons were kicking out civil servants so they could install loyalists. Loyalists such as Catherine Cornelius, a cousin of President Bill Clinton, who had handled travel arrangements during the 1992 Clinton presidential campaign. And Catherine had recommended that the Clintons outsourced the White House travel office to Worldwide Travel Incorporated. Conveniently, that is the same travel company she had worked with during the campaign. When she was eventually hired into the role, she wrote memos estimating that $200,000 could be saved by outsourcing. Harry Thomason, a Hollywood producer who was a close friend of President Clinton's, had also been involved. He'd offered his advice on the matter, but he may have had his own motivations. You see, he had a financial interest in an air consulting firm that had also worked with the Clintons in the Clinton campaign. Essentially, it seemed like some kind of weird Nepo scheme. Hey, let's start doing business with our family. It's crazy. I could never imagine a president ever doing that. Or just like, why is that legal and stuff? That's sarcasm, by the way. The current president is doing a lot of stuff like that. Did Bush do anything? He didn't really like his brothers, did he? Did he? All right. We need to fire and then subsequently rehire the White House woodcutting office. And we need to hire people from Crawford, Texas. I'm George W. Bush. I am from Maine, but somehow I have a Texas accent. I'm the only man in my family with a Texas accent. There are WMDs, and I can ruin America. I can finish what my father started in the Middle East. And I can feed the Americans the biggest lie that's ever been fed. Me and my buddy Dick Cheney. The Clintons were positioning themselves outside of the travel office events, and Hillary depicted her role as marginal. She'd only been vaguely aware of the situation in the travel office, even though she'd asked to be kept abreast of developments. According to her, she was preoccupied with other matters and had no idea how or why the shakeup had been initiated. It was really odd. A press briefing from the White House Office of the Press Secretary dated May 21st, 1993 shares the Clinton side of the story. It was claimed that the travel office was not operating with adequate accounting procedures, and the following quote really paints a full picture. There's a lack of basic accounting systems or records you would expect to exist when you're handling money. The record keeping is informal, sloppy, and disorderly. The office had no general ledger, no cash receipts book, and no accounts payable system. The office is missing documentation in several areas, in particular petty cash transactions. One such missing sum of cash was a group of checks totaling $18,200 that were just completely unaccounted for, and they'd even shared the report with the FBI and shared that a criminal investigation was deemed necessary. Billy Dale would be the target of prosecution. He faced charges of embezzling $68,000. $54,000 of that was from 55 refund checks deposited into his own bank account, and $14,000 of it was from the office's petty cash fund. So the civil servants were crooked! Dale's defense claimed the money was used to cover future trip costs because news executives were complaining about the rising travel costs they were being asked to pay back. The prosecutors argued that the money was used to fund Dale's lakefront vacation home in Virginia, which is pretty epic. Still, the defense team countered that Dale was a modest man with a humble lifestyle, trusted by veteran reporters. In fact, the defense further argued that Dale had kept records that would definitively prove the money was used legitimately and not for personal gain. Conveniently, though, those records reportedly disappeared after Dale and his 6 employees were fired, at which time Clinton's relative, Catherine Cornelius, began working in the office. It's like that scene in SpongeBob where he shreds all the stuff in his head.
What's his name? What's his name? I got nothing on a name.
Is that in SpongeBob or am I making that up? What is it? I don't know. Anyways, once again, key documents went missing, feeding into the growing public perception that anything touching the Clintons, their friends, or their finances had a strange, mysterious way of disappearing. Dale was eventually acquitted of the embezzlement charges, but the legal defense had cost him nearly $500,000, and his 6 colleagues had also spent $200,000 on their own defenses. People were wise to the fact that these longtime White House employees were being replaced by people close to the Clintons. During a press briefing in which the press secretary, George Stephanopoulos, revealed that they were pursuing a criminal investigation, many questions were raised during the Q&A about Cornelius and Thomason. Is it a mistake, really, though, to have Kathy Cornelius, who wrote this memo suggesting this, now helping to run the office that she suggested be abolished? This question and subsequent exchanges unravel even more peculiar and strange details. Cornelius had expressed an interest in working in the travel office, then took the initiative to prepare the memo stating that $200,000 could be saved unprompted and without an assignment to do so, suggesting that the work be outsourced to Worldwide Travel Entertainment Worldwide, and then proposed that she run an office at a very high salary. What the fuck? When asked about Thomason, they wanted to know which airlines he suggested the White House work with and his relationship with those airlines. The responses from Stephanopoulos were a constant string of, I don't know. This guy's a goober. Anybody who they all look like fools. They really grilled him about all the suspicious elements of the allegations and assignments within the White House travel office. The situation smelled like diarrhea, dog shit, poopy fart, and it smelled so bad, in fact, that a committee on government reform and oversight investigated the White House travel office firings and submitted a report in September of 1996 that found this scandal, which became known as Travelgate, which is a story about the failure of the Clinton White House to live up to the ethical standards expected of the highest office in the land. Boom! A few months into the White House, instantly unethical. Interestingly enough, the wrongdoing wasn't found in the firing of the 7 employees, but rather what happened after the firing when attempts were made to hide the truth about who actually fired them and why. The motive of the firings was found to be political cronyism, which the president sought to reward his friend Harry Thomason with the spoils of the White House travel business expenses, and so a pretext for the firings was then created as a result of that. The subsequent smear campaign against the victims of the firing was a colossal damage control effort to minimize the role of the Clintons, and for them, by unleashing the full weight of the federal government against the 7 former employees, they grossly abused the rights of 7 American citizens and their families. And, you know, I even said, so the civil servants, I believed it for a second, but it's bullshit. They are good people. They represented the White House fairly. They're not elected officials. It seemed like it was pretty solid for bureaucracy. Then after all this, a cover-up operation prevented the numerous investigations that would take place from discovering the roles of those who fired the workers and why, as well as preventing investigators from discovering their efforts to prosecute the victims. And it turns out the Clintons, or at least Hillary, may have been much more involved than she'd said, because what people say and what they actually do are very rarely the exact same thing, if ever. David Watkins, a former top administrative aide to the White House who played a role in the firing of the 7 employees, had written a memo for the White House Chief of Staff that was later released saying, "We both know that there would be hell to pay if we failed to take swift and decisive action in conformity with the First Lady's wishes." So yeah, that implicates Hillary in directly wishing for the employees to be fired, and it's not the only time she's implicated either. In the investigation conducted by the Government Reform and Oversight Committee, it is stated that Watkins also claimed Mrs. Clinton told Thomason she wanted them all fired that day. And that's not part of the quote, but I added. And Mr. Thomason seemingly confirms this through a statement made by his attorney that Mrs. Clinton shared his views that the travel office employees should be replaced. So yeah, it was a mess of a situation with lots of obfuscation, which we are very used to now at this point. I mean, I guess it's been this way forever, kind of, if you look back, but God, the whole Epstein stuff is just like another level of gaslighting, because we can just see what's happening. We can see it on the internet. You can see it. You can't hide it. It's not the press or the news or whistleblowers. It's just like stuff's coming out and they're like, no. You know what I mean? It's like, what are you saying right now? We're not on your side. You serve us. You serve us. You know that, right? You serve us. Luckily, we have a travel office Travelgate final report on govinfo.gov that shares the following findings from the committee report. Plans to fire the travel office employees were in place from the earliest days of the Clinton administration. Harry Thomason instigated the firings. Harry Thomason abused his status and access due to his financial stake in the travel office business, and the White House misused and manipulated the FBI to further its political agenda. This is objective fact and truth. And Mrs. Clinton exerted pressure on senior White House staff to fire said employees. Then also, the White House engaged in a conspiracy of silence about the true story behind the firings for damage control purposes. And also, the internal White House Management Review omitted incriminating information about the president, Mrs. Clinton, and Harry Thomason. So there you have it. But unfortunately, there is some important context that ruins everything and all the stuff. The committee was Republican controlled, which was the opposition party to the Clintons at the time, who were Democrats, and there was strong dissent, obviously, from the Republicans with them going into the White House. So it's still on a .gov website. I don't know who the trust. Well, they didn't do that. They did do it. They didn't do that. They did it. Who did what? Somebody tell me. After this, an independent counsel led by prosecutor Robert W. Ray would investigate the Clintons for Hillary's involvement in the firing of the 7 longtime White House staffers, but ultimately they would not seek to charge or prosecute anyone. Ray stated, Mrs. Clinton's concerns ultimately influenced Watkins' decision to fire the travel office employees. The evidence was insufficient to prove a jury beyond a reasonable doubt that any of Mrs. Clinton's statements and testimony regarding her involvement in the travel office firings were knowingly false. Accordingly, the independent counsel has declined prosecution of Mrs. Clinton. So you could play it from any side, really, if you wanted to. I'm more on the side, if you couldn't tell, of thinking they're evil. But that is beside the point. The Clintons were becoming all too familiar with controversy and scandal, and the hits over time would keep on coming and coming and coming and coming. Incidentally, another scandal was discovered while investigating the Travelgate scandal, and it was dubbed Filegate. You see, a years-long acquisition of hundreds of unauthorized FBI files on former White House employees was discovered within the Clinton administration. The employees in question included senior Republicans and even Billy Dale, the man much of Travelgate was blamed on. This was also investigated by the Committee on Government Reform and Oversight, which once again was a Republican-controlled entity, and they stated that these files contained the most private and personal information on an individual, his spouse, and family. Basically, they knew everything about the people who were being spied on. Some information that would be contained in the documents would be criminal history, arrest records, etc. The files were acquired by 2 staffers within the Clinton White House, Craig Livingstone, the director of the security office, and Anthony Marchesa, a friend and political ally of Livingstone. Anthony was assigned to the White House's Office of Personnel Security due to efforts made by Livingstone. So they're kind of, helping each other out in a sense. It was claimed that they'd requested the documents because they were operating on outdated staff lists, but still there were alleged inconsistencies within their own statements between their statements and in conflict with sworn testimony from the FBI, the Secret Service, and a veteran employee of the security office. Basically, they're all making shit up. Mark Fabian, a White House counsel, had issued a statement to the New York Times saying, no one in the White House ever reviewed the files, trying to sell the notion that while the files weren't supposed to be in the White House when they were, at least no one had cracked them open and read the information they shouldn't have had in the first place in the White House. But unfortunately for Mark Fabian, his memo was not shared to everyone, because later in the same month, Fabian issued the statement. Anthony Marchesa would make his own statement saying that not only had he read the files, but he'd read everything alphabetically from A to G, looking for derogatory information, and passed 3 files along to Livingstone, who read those 3. So basically the opposite of what that other guy said. Then the White House was like, okay, so Livingstone read 3 files, but that's it. Both Livingstone and Marchesa would resign, and while no one was ever charged in connection with the White House possessing hundreds of FBI files, Hillary Clinton was, of course, implicated. A 1993 agent interview between Bernard Nussbaum and another fellow by the name of Skollenbreen records Nussbaum saying that Craig Livingstone, the other guy, comes highly recommended by Hillary Clinton. So yeah, there you go. He's a great guy, to be honest, according to Hillary Clinton. Furthering that point, when the director of the security office role was still vacant, a conversation between FBI agent Gary Aldrich and Bill Kennedy, a partner at Hillary's prior law firm, Rose Law Firm, discussed who would be a suitable candidate for the director position. So, yet again, cronyism, seems like it, or whatever it's called. Nepotism, that's when your parents are rich and famous, I think. According to the Government Oversight and Reform Committee, Kennedy had asked Agent Aldrich what type of person should be in the director role, to which Aldrich answered, someone squeaky clean, meticulous, careful, discreet, mature, and someone with a depth of understanding of security issues. Following Aldrich's response to Kennedy's own question, Kennedy reportedly responded back with, it doesn't matter anyway, it's a done deal. Hillary wants him for that slot, that is Livingstone. Aldrich would even go on to write a book called Unlimited Access, an FBI agent inside the Clinton White House, which is, that's a hardcore book title, dude. Unlimited Access, what it's like being an FBI agent inside the White House. With the Clintons. Immediately, the White House tried getting media networks not to share interviews with him or cover the book, calling it a fabrication that could not pass the fact checkers of the National Enquirer, much less the New York Times or any reputable organization. That's high praise from the Clinton White House. Hillary Clinton obviously denied any involvement in the hiring of Craig Livingston, but someone definitely probably hired him, I think. So, whose shoulders would the blame of hiring Livingston fall on? Well, conveniently for conspiracy theorists and the Clintons alike, that honor fell on the late White House counsel Vince Foster Jr., the lawyer who had committed suicide back in 1993. The man who is now being said to have hired Livingston was someone that could not be questioned to confirm or deny the claims. Many obviously did not believe this to be the case because it's so convenient. And according to the committee which investigated, while Vince Foster had reportedly been planning on speaking with Livingstone, Livingstone failed to recall any contact whatsoever with Foster in a sworn testimony given during a deposition. So, who do you believe? Once again, the story is pulled in so many different inconsistent, incoherent directions, but maybe one set of files, the files discovered which were related to a previous fall guy for the Clinton White House scandal, may offer some answers, guys. The files on Billy Dale, which were ordered 7 months after he was fired, which would be interesting given the fact that we detailed how he was the primary scapegoat for the Travelgate scandal, and with the allegation that Hillary Clinton had pressured the firing of those travel office employees, it was speculated that she may have had her hands on those documents. A fingerprint analysis was conducted on the personnel files following the request of Senate Republicans, specifically asking the FBI laboratory to check Billy Dale's file. And while several sets of unidentified fingerprints were found, none were connected to Hillary or her top aides. And ultimately, in regard to this scandal, Hillary was cleared. But while she was facing scrutiny for allegations within the office, Bill faced scrutiny for his actions outside of the office because he's a man whore. And this is where shit starts to get really, really dark. You thought all that other crony political nonsense was dark? It's just the government. It's just the way politics works. It's just, you know, the status quo. It has been this way for, I don't know, since, I don't know, long time, probably forever, honestly. Bill is a dog, all right? I'd say Bill and Hillary Clinton's marriage has been put to the test perhaps more than any other public relationship that has ever existed. 6 women made public allegations ranging from consensual affairs to resulting in the first impeachment of a president since Andrew Johnson. That's this guy. All right. It also resulted in an expensive settlement, law license suspension, and a contempt of court citation. Now referred to for some reason as the dark period in interviews, the affairs, both alleged and confirmed, were scandals that came closer than anything else to sinking the Clinton presidency and ending their political careers entirely. The first love life scandal was the scandal of Jennifer Flowers, which erupted in January of 1992 when the Star tabloid published allegations that the Little Rock singer and television reporter had conducted a 12-year extramarital affair with then-Governor Bill Clinton beginning in 1977, just 2 years after Bill and Hillary became married. Allegedly.
I'm delighted that the American public knows that I did not lie about that relationship.
Jennifer Flowers, who was paid over $100,000 for her story, held a press conference on January 27, 1992, one day after Clinton's famous 60 Minutes denial. An absolutely titillating 60 Minutes denial of him denying shit that he would then be proven he's a dude. What is wrong with these people?
Who is Jennifer Flowers? You know her.
Oh, yes.
How do you know her? How would you describe your relationship?
Very limited.
In her press conference, she played excerpts of secretly recorded phone conversations with Bill Clinton. So
that's all. I mean, I expect him to come look into it and interview you and everything. But I just think that if everybody's on record denying it, you got no problem.
pretty big W on her part. The tapes captured Clinton advising Flowers to deny if asked about the relationship and making unflattering comments about Mario Cuomo, the governor of New York.
Well, I don't particularly care for Cuomo's demeanor.
Well, he is so aggressive.
Well, he seems like he could get real mean.
Mean son of a bitch.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if he didn't have some mafioso major connections.
Well, he acts like one.
Yeah.
After this, Bill Clinton publicly apologized for the comments about Cuomo, calling him a mafioso, effectively authenticating the recordings as legitimate by apologizing. The Clinton campaign strategist George Stephanopoulos initially claimed the tapes were doctored, but later admitted on CNBC in 2000 the following.
I say his voice, but they were selectively edited.
So man, they put him in audition, they were spliced together, selectively edited. Whatever, dude. Following the revelations, Bill Clinton's poll numbers plummeted. He even trailed hard hitter Paul Tsongas by 20 points in New Hampshire before the 60 Minutes interview in which he and Hillary appeared together, with Bill acknowledging he had caused pain in his marriage while categorically denying an affair with Flowers by saying, I did not do that. Oh shit, I think I believe him.
She's a legend and is described in some detail in a supermarket tabloid, which she calls a 12-year affair with you.
That allegation is false.
This is before he won the presidential election. Just so you guys are clear on this. He did end up taking the presidential nomination when old Tsongas withdrew from the race, not to be a spoiler, and Clinton won the election, as we obviously know. But still, the scandals stemming from alleged affairs were just beginning. They are the earmark of his entire career. Jennifer earned approximately $500,000 from selling her story, posing for Penthouse, and from subsequent media appearances. She published 2 books about the affair and currently lives in Las Vegas, having endorsed Donald Trump in 2016 when he was running against Hillary Clinton. That is like I feel bad for Hillary. Bill's a dude. He's such a freak. Now, obviously, at the time, he's denying all these allegations, but luckily the truth would come out later during an investigation into a different alleged affair. So you'll learn the truth about the first affair when we dig deeper into the next affair. I would say the most consequential of all the Clinton scandals began during the November 1995 government shutdown, when 22-year-old White House intern Monica Lewinsky encountered the nearly 50-year-old president. Their relationship began on November 15th, 1995 and continued through 9 documented sexual encounters until March 29th, 1997. The encounters, which involved oral sex but not intercourse, took place in the study adjacent to the Oval Office. And by the way, I need to make a retraction. I said something untrue earlier, or at least half true. I said earlier that Bill Clinton was facing scrutiny from outside the White House office. It was actually right next door. Linda Tripp, a Pentagon colleague who befriended Lewinsky, began secretly recording their phone conversations in September of 1997. Tripp captured 22 hours of recordings, including Lewinsky's account of the affair and, crucially, mention of a navy blue Gap dress stained with the president's jizz from a February 1997 encounter. Tripp contacted Kenneth Starr's Office of Independent Counsel on January 12, 1998, which triggered the investigation that would lead to the impeachment of the sitting president, Bill Clinton. Clinton's January 26, 1998 denial became one of the most infamous presidential statements in American history up until that point. Standing beside Hillary in the White House Roosevelt room, finger jabbing in the air, he declared,
I did not have sexual relations with that woman.
The next day, Hillary appeared on NBC's Today Show denouncing a vast right-wing conspiracy. She blamed one person for the constant barrage of negative publicity about herself and her husband. It wasn't herself, and it certainly wasn't her husband, the president. It was special prosecutor and dickhead Kenneth Starr, an independent counsel whom Hillary accused of being politically aligned with the opposition of the Clintons. Conveniently, of course. Now, I do understand her bitterness, given that it was Kenneth Starr's investigation that ultimately led to the convictions of the McDougalls, among others, in the Whitewater scandal, which created some animosity between this son of a bitch and the Clintons, obviously. And this time, unfortunately, the vast right-wing conspiracy was actually true, as the blue dress would prove to be Clinton's undoing. FBI DNA analysis matched the stain to Clinton's blood sample, and to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty, the odds that it wasn't Bill was 7.87 trillion to 1. So I'd say that it's probably him. But I don't know a lot about numbers and shit, so You're gonna have to bear with me on that. So confronted with this physical evidence, Clinton testified before a grand jury on August 17th, 1998. I was just 2 years old, becoming the first sitting president to do so while under criminal investigation. That evening, he addressed the nation and admitted to a relationship with Miss Lewinsky that was not appropriate. In fact, it was wrong. He actually said it something like this. In fact, it was wrong. I'm not gonna do any more Bill Clinton. He admits that while his answers during the January deposition were legally accurate, he held back information, calling it a critical lapse in judgment. A critical lapse in judgment. He's Logan Paul, basically. The House impeached Clinton on December 19th, 1998 on 2 counts. One was perjury before a grand jury, and the next was obstruction of justice. The Senate acquitted him on February 12th, 1999, with the perjury charge failing 45 to 55 and the obstruction charge splitting at 50-50, which is well short. Both are well short of the 2/3 majority that's required for a conviction. And despite the admission from Bill Clinton, the results exonerated him, and it would be Lewinsky who would go on to endure years of public humiliation to the point that she describes herself as patient zero of internet shaming. She retreated from public life, earned a master's degree from the London School of Economics in 2005, and returned to prominence with her 2014 Vanity Fair essay, Shame and Survival. And with the coming Me Too era, she reconsidered the power dynamics of her relationship. Obviously, the president is the most powerful guy in the world. She wrote in 2018, "He was my boss. He was the most powerful man on the planet. He was 27 years my senior with enough life experience to know better." Exactly. So yeah, Bill admitted to Monica Lewinsky's claims, and it made the rounds in the media, but it didn't have any legal blowback on him, which wasn't the case with every allegation, however. Paula Jones, another individual claiming Bill Clinton made advances, alleged that on May 8th, 1991, then Governor Clinton had summoned her to his hotel suite at the Excelsior Hotel in Little Rock during a Senate conference. And when she arrived, she claimed that Clinton propositioned her for oral sex and even exposed himself. Jones, a 24-year-old state clerical worker, filed a lawsuit on May 6th, 1994, just 2 days before the 3-year statute of limitations expired. She was seeking $700,000 in damages to her reputation and her career. Clinton's legal team argued that a sitting president enjoyed temporary immunity from civil litigation, and the case reached the Supreme Court, which ruled unanimously 9-0 in Clinton v. Jones in 1997 that the president enjoys no immunity from civil suits for unofficial conduct predating his presidency. What? Thank God. What the fuck? You tell me you can just do whatever you want when you're president? That's what it seems like. Seems like that shit, dude. God, I can't believe people get mad when you talk shit about imagine getting mad at someone for talking shit about anyone who wants to dedicate their life to politics. You just want money. And you just want to seem good. Are there any good politicians? There are. There's like 3 right now. There's like 3 in the Senate right now, guys. Senate and House. One of them's a liberal. All right, I'm going to say it. One of them's a liberal, and they're awesome. Not going to say who it is, though. Comment down below. Fucking liberals. You see the last video, I was shitting on Trump a lot. So like, that's what I'm trying to be bipartisan, mean to both sides, because you have to be. And everybody, one guy tweeted at me and was like,
"You went too far with this video. You went too far with this video, dude."
Bro, I haven't gone far enough. I can't say what I want to say or I'll get in trouble. And I also have a candy company, and I can't, a lot of people who work for the candy company, my views don't represent their views whatsoever. So I'm not going to speak for them all. What I am going to do, though, is shit on people because I can. But I'm not going to endorse people. Except for, I'm not going to endorse anybody. Smash like. Justice John Paul Stevens wrote that such litigation was highly unlikely to occupy any substantial amount of a petitioner's time, which was a prediction proven spectacularly wrong. A deposition of Bill Clinton for the Clinton v. Jones case in January of 1998 would unravel things even further. In this deposition, he was asked about multiple alleged affairs: the affair with Monica Lewinsky, Paula Jones, and Jennifer Flowers, and even more, because the guy was a whore. The affair with Flowers he denied entirely in 1992. He did this in a similar fashion to how he'd flatly denied involvement with Lewinsky, then later admitted to the involvement with Lewinsky after being impeached. But in the deposition, Bill Clinton admitted that there was in fact a sexual relationship with Flowers while he was governor. Oh my God! Lucky for Clinton, though, Judge Susan Weber Wright would preside over the case. And Susan Weber Wright had studied navigation law at the University of Arkansas School of Law. Bill Clinton was a professor there at this time and had taught Judge Wright during her time at the school. So, it was pretty controversial, as you can imagine, when Wright dismissed the case against Clinton, claiming that Jones had failed to demonstrate damages. That being said, when the decision was appealed, Clinton would settle the lawsuit to prevent it from going to trial, paying $850,000, which is $150,000 more than the initial amount Jones had sought. Obviously, paying a settlement doesn't mean you're guilty. We learned this from P. Diddy. I'm not even going to say anything else. I'm not going to say but or whatever, but ducks quack like ducks and shit. So... and all that. But yeah, of course, the settlement, there's no admission of wrongdoing, there's no apology, and Clinton's lawyers would maintain that Jones' claims were baseless and that the settlement was agreed to only to end the lawsuit and just move on. And while Judge Wright had thrown out the case against Clinton, she wasn't entirely on his side. In fact, she held Clinton in civil contempt of court, a first for any sitting president, writing that his testimony was intentionally false. And as a result, she fined him $90,000 and referred him to the Arkansas Supreme Court, which would suspend his law license for 5 years. President, who gives a shit? He shouldn't even be able to do law anyways. He needs to get back on that sax is what he needs. On Bill's last day in office, he agreed to the suspension and a $25,000 fine to avoid disbarment, because that would be really embarrassing. And Jones, who received approximately $200,000 after legal fees and taxes, later posed for Penthouse, lost a celebrity boxing match to Tanya Harding, and also endorsed Donald Trump in 2016. The 90s, man. The 90s is a crazy time. Easily the most serious allegation that Bill Clinton faced was from Juanita Broaddrick. Her allegation stands apart in its severity. She accused Clinton of raping her in a Little Rock hotel room on April 25th, 1978, when she was a 35-year-old nursing home administrator and he was Arkansas Attorney General. She alleged that Clinton bit her lip during the assault and told her as he left, "You better get some ice on that."
And he got up and straightened himself, and I was crying at the moment. And he walks to the door and calmly puts on his sunglasses. And before he goes out the door, he says, "You better get some ice on that." And he turns and went out the door. On your lip. Yeah.
5 people confirmed that Broaddrick had told them about the incident at the time, including friend Norma Rogers, who said she found Broaddrick in a state of shock with torn pantyhose and a swollen lip. No criminal charges were ever filed due to Arkansas's 6-year statute of limitations, and Clinton has never personally addressed the allegation, with attorney David Kendall issuing only a blanket denial in February of 1999, saying, "Any allegation that the president assaulted Miss Broaddrick more than 20 years ago is absolutely false. Deny, deny, deny. That is the Clinton methodology." And it has worked very well. They are somehow still somewhat relevant in 2016. Hillary won the popular vote. I mean, what the is the state of this world, dude? Oh my God.
Well, actually, you just need to look deeper. You just need to look
How about we just get some young people who actually care about their country and the people around them to run this shit? How about that, dude? How about we just get some young people? Not just kidding. I don't want young people either. I want no one. I want anarchy is what I want. I want to be made king. Not really. Me king. Despite numerous investigations, they've never been charged with a crime. And there's even some recent scandals with Hillary Clinton exclusively using a private email server within her own home in New York for State Department business instead of official government systems from 2019 to 2013. That ordeal is probably what lost her the 2016 presidential election against Donald Trump. She was never charged with that. That is unbelievable that she did that. That's so dumb. It's so stupid that she had people around her just like letting her do that shit. It's insane. But yeah, never charged, obviously. And sure, the FBI found that Hillary and her colleagues were extremely careless in handling very sensitive, highly classified information with email chains on her private server containing top secret and also special access program level matters, but no charges were filed. The director of the FBI at the time stated that in reviewing past cases involving mishandling of classified information, they could not find one that would support criminal charges based on the facts of the Clinton situation. In fact, All prosecuted cases involved clearly intentional and willful mishandling of the information, along with vast quantities of materials exposed and indications of disloyalty to the United States or efforts to obstruct justice, none of which were present in the Clinton situation. He concluded no reasonable prosecutor would bring such a case. It's the defense that I'm going to use when the IRS comes knocking. I didn't know. My mom taught me how to do my taxes. Just kidding. I pay my taxes. I'm legit. But the I'm a stupid idiot defense only works when you are American royalty, by the way, just so if you're wondering that. But beside that, it's shocking, especially when you consider that during the same years, 2009 to 2013, when Hillary served as Secretary of State, the Clinton Foundation was receiving donations totaling millions from foreign governments, which raised conflict of interest concerns. But who cares though, guys? Because she didn't win. Who gives a f? Then there's Epstein. We've talked about this before. Bill Clinton cannot deny that he was in fact associated with Epstein. He's in the flight logs. The two are photographed together, and Bill Clinton supposedly wrote a letter in Epstein's 50th birthday book. The letter pictured here. One of the trips that Clinton took with Epstein was to Africa with disgraced actor Kevin Spacey along for the ride as well, where Spacey claims young girls were present, putting then President Clinton at risk. Whether Clinton ever visited Epstein's private island remains the most disputed element. And Bubba's official 2019 statement explicitly denied ever visiting the island, the New Mexico ranch, or the Florida residence, stating that he had visited Epstein's New York apartment only once in 2002 with staff and security present. With all that in mind, I don't think I trust the motherfucker, to be honest with you. His track record of honesty leaves almost everything to be desired. In fact, his reputation of trust and honesty is so bad, he faced impeachment over perjury. That's crazy. That is like the badge of you cannot be trusted. Everything you say is a lie. And he's definitely a sexual deviant. So I'm not saying it's true, but like I'm heavily alluding to it because I'm gonna lose my mind if I don't. So believe it if you will, but it is important to note that no Epstein victim or accuser has ever alleged sexual misconduct by Bill Clinton. In fact, the only reference to Clinton participating in any form of sexual activity are the recently leaked emails between Jeffrey Epstein and his brother Mark, in which Mark tells Jeffrey to ask Steve Bannon if Putin has photos of Trump blowing Bubba. And that's if we are to believe that Bubba is Bill Clinton. We know Bubba is a nickname that Clinton uses, but it's a very common name, and it's also Ghislaine Maxwell's horse as well. Either way, I hope those photos come out. Thanks for watching, guys. If you enjoyed, press the like button down below. Go to sour.gg, buy some candy. Go to the App Store, look up Legend of Zulk. It's a mobile game that's based on the characters from the candy that we made. Join the Gump Club. Go to gump.club to leave viewer mail in these videos. I wrote to our investors, "Hello MFs, recording a deep dive on the mysterious Bubba from the Epstein files. Leave some related questions about the video for them to be featured." And the Neanderthal Duck said, I haven't done any real research on it, but I've heard from a couple people that Bubba is also the name of Maxwell's horse. That would be huge. That would be huge. That would be hilarious. That would be the ideal world if it didn't implicate Bubba, Bill Clinton, but rather Maxwell's horse. Either way, I don't know. There is some strange animosity between Trump and Hillary, and I think it's because of the love triangle thing that's going on, but I'm not 100% sure on that, and I wouldn't bet on that. Grim Cube said, "Is it a horse or is it our commander-in-chief?" Was commander-in-chief. I think the allegation is that Bubba is Bill Clinton, and Trump. I don't think Trump's a horse. Or whatever. I don't really know, though, to be honest. Anyways, that concludes viewer mail. The Gump Club Discord is very new, so if you guys want to ask some questions for them to be featured in future videos, join, and I'll see you in the next video.